Well, you've heard that music before. Can we turn the sound down?
Well, I'm getting ready to choose, but Chris.
Turn the sound.
It's up there. Oh, up there? I don't have my glasses on.
With that face.
One of the things we are not, we may be a UFO museum, but technology is not in our vocabulary.
There you go. You know what I said? You can turn off that thing. How many here again had not seen the film? Wow. So what did you think? Did you think it was like old-fashioned, like from way back, or did it seem up to date? I'm just curious by you guys, whether you young people, did it seem, oh my God, that looks like an oldie, or not? Did it remind you of other science fiction films you've seen? No?
Oh, I felt that it was dated.
That's my.
Obviously,
you've answered my question.
I think as far as thematics go, that it's pretty timeless.
Well, it is that. I mean, can you imagine having a computer that big today? I mean, that's one thing Stanley Kubrick didn't foresee, was the fact that we have a laptop. And remember, when I go down and take HAL apart, well, see, because computers, that's how big they were back then. They were whole roomfuls of equipment for one computer. And I don't know what you guys would like to know, but I can make a few comments while you're thinking about if you have questions. There's a kind of funny story about the voice of Hal. The voice of Hal is very specific. I mean, it's kind of no other voice like it. He was actually a Canadian actor by the name of Douglas Rains, who is mainly known up in Canada for doing Shakespeare. He had done, as far as I know, he had nothing to do with films before this happened. When Stanley was thinking about the film, planning it, he was going to use an actor by the name of Marty Balsam. For those of you who may remember the film Psycho, Marty Balsam was the detective who was killed on the stairway. Then he decided, no, that's a New York, he didn't want a New York accent. So then he hired an actor by the name of Nigel Davenport, British actor. He lasted about 2 weeks, and then he paid him off and let him go. He said, no, I don't want a British accent. So he turned to his first assistant director, whose name was Derek Cracknell. Oh, by the way, I should preface, this film was totally filmed in England, so the crew were all British. So he turned to his first assistant, he said, Derek, you do the voice of Hal for the actors. So for the rest of the film, which was 4 months or give or take a week or so, this was how, for us, Gary Lockwood and myself, this was the voice of Hal. Dive, better take a stretch pill, Dive. Oh, like that. No, it sounded like Michael Caine. You know? No, really, I'm not joking. He was all like that. That was the voice of Hal for us. And the other thing is, some people are interested in, the other thing that takes this film, that none of the special effects were computer generated. Everything in this film was done one way or the other mechanically. For example, all in one shot, if you notice, the first time you see us go into the centrifuge, I come down the ladder, and Gary Lockwood, the other actor, is upside down eating. And we are about to have an interview with the BBC. And all in one shot, I walk seemingly upside down to him. How that was done was, the centrifuge was about 3 stories high. And it actually moved at about 3 miles an hour. So what we would do is, he was hanging upside down with a hidden harness that attached to the seat. They had to paste the food so it wouldn't drop, right? So all I did was I just walked in place, and they revolved Gary Lockwood down to me. But the camera, being subjective, thought I was walking upside down to him. But the other stunt, and it was a stunt, people have often asked, well, did you do any stunt work? The most dangerous and the scariest was when Hal will not let my character back into the spaceship, and I have to be blown into the emergency entrance. So it looks like I'm weightless being blown in toward you, laterally. That was actually filmed upside down, like this. So that, therefore, the top of the set, which just showed a little bit of the pod, I'm parallel out here on a platform, and next to me is a circus roustabout holding a rope with very heavy gloves, and the rope had been measured with 2 knots, so that when the first knot reached his gloves, what he did, well, first of all, I went diving headfirst, free fall, to the camera. They had measured it so that I would be stopped several inches from the lens of the camera, 2 stories below, or 3 stories, whatever it was. When the knot reached his gloves, he jumped off and hurtled down. He was heavier than I was. Hurtled to the floor. I went flying up to the ceiling again. Then, when I got to the top, he let go again. As soon as his feet hit the floor, he let go again and waited for the second knot. Then he clinched it. And so what you got in slow motion, it wasn't slow motion in the film, but it looked like I was going vroom, 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 like that. So that's how that particular stunt was done. Another thing you might be interested in, Arthur C. Clarke, one of our greatest science fiction writers, when I was 12, 13, I was a real science fiction fan, which I wasn't particularly when I did Space Odyssey, but I subscribed to all the science fiction magazines like Astounding Science Fiction, Galaxy Science Fiction, Fantasy and Science Fiction. There were 3 major magazines in those days, and I also read anthologies. They'd have the best science fiction short stories of 51, 1952, 1953, etc. I'm showing my age. Anyway, I remember reading this short story called The Sentinel. How many of you have heard of the short story by Arthur C. Clarke, The Sentinel? Oh, well, as you know, that was the germ of the idea, and that short story dealt with the part of the film of the scientists going to the space station and then to the moon and discovering the monolith. That's all it dealt with. And when I was reading the script, I said, something is terribly familiar about this film, and then it hit me. I remembered that many years earlier reading it when I was a kid. I may think of other things to talk about, but is there any questions that are kind of your dying?